Hello and welcome back. For those who haven't seen my previous data analysis videos or just don't know what's going on, 17 Lands finally just released the full data set for the Vintage Cube that was on Magic Arena for about 3 weeks. So we have an incredible data set, the best we've ever had, for going through and analyzing cards in a Vintage Cube environment. Now, this is the Magic Arena Cube, so it's not going to be exactly the same as any particular Vintage Cube, but some of the core archetypes still hold true. So today, I'm just going to go through in great detail for these cards, just talking through what cards synergize with them, what cards don't synergize with them. We're doing some clustering analysis on the decks, seeing what archetypes exist, how well the archetypes perform, and all of that. And the some of these make sense. The only one that's weird is Seething Song. The only reason I did Seething Song today is because in my last video, Seething Song had like the highest percent improvement when played by top players relative to all players, and I just wanted to see what they were doing. So let's jump into that. Seething Song is the first one. So to make this analysis work, I did k-means clustering on all of the decks for best of one format on the Vintage Cube, and I just chose 8 clusters for all of the different cards. So basically for like Seething Song, I took all of the decks that had Seething Song in it, and then I found 8 clusters of decks or archetypes of decks that had Seething Song in it. And then from there, you can do a bunch of statistical analysis to find synergy stores. So like this is the equation for the metric I used, which is frequency lift, like how often the card appears in decks. And then win rate impact is like, of the times it appears in decks, what is like the statistical significance it has on the win rate of that deck. And then I'm multiplying it by the win rate width to normalize for cards, because basically the baseline frequency lift times win rate impact measures baseline synergy, but you could have like a card that is synergistic in just a bad archetype. Oops. So that's why the win rate width is like a bit of a normalizing factor, because we want synergistic cards that actually do something. You don't want a card that's synergistic because it takes you from 0 win rate to 10%. You want a card that's synergistic because it takes you from 60% win rate to 65. So that's why this metric is here. And so that's the metric I'm going to be measuring for a lot of this analysis. So starting off for each card, I've just broken it down to top 15 cards that are synergistic, and then bottom 15 cards that are anti-synergistic. And by that, it means basically when this card ends up in a deck with Seething Song, it likely decreases the win rate of the overall archetype. So we can see Brain Freeze, number 1, playing it in Storm makes sense. Glorybringer, number 2, you love to see it, and that gives me some hints as to what the good players were doing with Seething Song. Sneak Attack kind of makes sense. You could play this turn 2, or on turn 3, Sneak plus Activate, so it lets you cheat that out a lot faster. And we can see people are probably sneak attacking World Spine Worm or flashing World Spine Worms into play. Wishclaw Talisman, probably a similar archetype. So it like this kind of data is really cool because you can tell there's kind of 3 to 4 like major archetypes being played here successfully. One is like Brain Freeze, Lion's Eye Diamond, Underworld Breach Storm. The other one is Sneak Attack / Flash, like World Spine Worm stuff. And then there appears to be like mono red aggro with Gut, Glorybringer. And then I don't really know what Corromination is doing, maybe alongside Sneak Attack, but interesting to see there. Cards to not play with it, Yawgmoth's Will. So I guess Underworld Breach based Storm is better than Yawgmoth's Will. Emrakul being anti-synergy is interesting because we have Sneak Attack, so I would assume that you want to Sneak Attack Emrakul, but I guess not. No Dark Ritual, so it seems like the Brain Freeze Storm decks perform a lot better than the black. Is Tendrils? Yeah, Tendrils is here. Mystical Tutor, Show and Tell. Yeah, so don't put Seething Song in like a black Tendrils based deck. If you're going to play it in Storm, play it in Underworld Breach type stuff. That's kind of Faithless Looting, Recurring Nightmare. Kind of makes sense. There's no synergy there. So yeah, that's the base of the card. And this is the 8 clusters that we have and how they performed. So you can just think of these as like 8 different archetypes In reality, the archetypes are quite continuous, and the data actually backs this up quite a lot. The clusters are overlapping quite a bit. So they're not, it's not like deck number 7 is so different than cluster number 1 or things like that. But they do have meaningful differences. There's statistically significant separation between them, and we can see quite a bit of performance deviation. I'm going to show this graph for all of the cards. So I'm going to go through what this is in depth now, and then the next time you see it, it won't be so overwhelming. So there's 8 clusters that we kind of did, and I broke down the cards into 2 different tiers. So the blue graph is basically the average win rate of the decks. Nothing changed there. And this is, on the right, a histogram of the performance of those decks. So you can see cluster ID number 2. This is how many wins decks in that cluster had on average. So you can see higher concentration at 1 win decks, and then a couple 3, 4, 5, 6 decks. You can see Seething Song, overall, not very good. A lot of concentration at 1 and 2 and 0 win decks by default. But through this synergy metric that I mentioned here, frequency lift, win rate impact, win rate width, you can kind of rank cards by how synergistic they are. So these are sort of the top 15 synergistic cards. And basically what I did is I separated decks into the base deck, like this is just all decks. And then I looked at what the top 25% of decks that had, or they had the top 25% of synergistic cards in the deck. So basically they had more synergistic cards in the deck than the other 75% of decks. So this is kind of like the decks that got there, in a sense. And you can see the performance goes up quite a bit. And so this is a histogram of the decks that got there. These are the decks that, you know, if you're trying to build Underworld Breach, Brain Freeze, stuff like that, you have 75% of the cards that you would want. I didn't do 100% because, you know, then you're going to have like the Mox, the Black Lotus, those kind of things start to take over, and you're just measuring like win rate. This is enough where you can get some synergy, but you're not always getting everything. Like this would be Brain Freeze, LED, Underworld Breach. Sometimes you have a Black Lotus, but not always. You know, sometimes you have Ancestral, maybe not a Time Walk, that kind of thing. So these are the decks that really got there. This is kind of the best the deck can be. And so that's what this graph, the green line is the high synergy decks, or like the top 25% of decks within that cluster, how they're performing. And so you can see some of them improve a little bit, some of them improve a ton, some of them improve like crazy amounts. So there's a bit of difference in some decks are kind of at their peak performance, like cluster 6 is there. And some decks win a lot when they get all the cards they want. So we'll go to that now. So I just have kind of an overview of what kind of cards are in each cluster to give us a broad sense of what the archetypes are. If you want me to go even more in depth, please let me know, because I can, you know, make a scatter plot of this deck in each cluster, really analyze what these decks are doing. I felt like this overview was enough to kind of get a sense of, okay, this is what the deck is doing. So cluster 2, worth mentioning too, Seething Song just didn't have many decks overall, but it was such a weird outlier from the last video, I just wanted to know. So this cluster only has 33 decks total. And so these are like the most frequent cards in the deck. You can see Minsc and Boo, Thornspire Verge, Atali, Goldspan Dragon. And then Taiga is like the highest impact. So this appears to be like a red-green ramp deck with, you know, Minsc and Boo 50% of the time. You're ramping into Glorybringers, Deathgreeter Champions. You're playing Ancient Tomb and Seething Song to just make your deck go faster. And the highest impact cards, like I said, because we're focusing more on synergy, like the decks that got there, it doesn't mean you got all the power necessarily. It just means you got the cards that are good in the archetype, because we're able to measure what cards are good in the archetype. So in this case, it's like cluster 2 decks that got Taiga, Glorybringer, Deathgreeter's Champion, those kind of things are the ones performing well. And you can see a little bit of a boost, but the baseline win rate of the deck's actually not bad either. 3.48 is fairly high. Cluster 3 is the best performing deck by far. This appears to be essentially mono red. It's Glorybringer, Arena of Glory, Gut, Fury, Fire Blast, and then the highest impact cards. Glorybringer is the best card for this archetype, which kind of makes sense. Turn 3 Seething Song out of Glorybringer is a really strong play. And it seems to be strong with Deathgreeter's Champion, Lelia, Gut, Sparring Vantage, Robber the Rich. So essentially just mono red aggro with Seething Song seems to be the best thing to be doing with Seething Song. The decks that got there, 4.77 average wins is very high. And then cluster 6, this is like the Sneak Attack, Emrakul, Torsten, Flash decks. Interestingly, the highest impact cards are like Memory Lapse, Misty Rainforest, Otawara. So it seems like the best build of the deck is going more controlling and a little bit more tempo instead of all in flash. Splashing blue for Memory Lapse Flash and stuff like that kind of makes sense too. And it seems like Worldspine Worm is the best flash sneak target if you're trying to Seething Song as well. That deck didn't improve too much. And then cluster 4 is like red-green sneak. You have like Atali, but then you have Taiga, Llanowara's Birds of Paradise, Once Upon a Time, so kind of similar to cluster 6, and you can see the performance is quite similar. So this is like more of a continuum. This is like blue-red flash based Seething Song, and this appears to be like red-green sneak attack, maybe in natural order somewhere in there type stuff. Cluster 0, Seething Song, Brain Freeze, Breach, Wheel of Fortune. So this is like blue-red Storm, essentially, and that makes sense because the Storm decks that don't get there lose a lot, but the Storm decks that do get there, you know, decent win rate, still roughly just on par with red-green ramp in general. Cluster 5, this appears to be like black-red Sneak Reanimator, and I guess here's where Crabomination comes in. Seems to be quite good in the black-red Seething Song Sneak Attack archetype. And then the last two, this is Seething Song Tendrils, cluster 1, which we saw Tendrils Yawgmoth's Will does have negative synergy with this deck. And it seems like your deck is much better when you're just playing Lightning Bolts and Dismembers and stuff like that. And then this is kind of combining all of the Storm decks together. So you're playing Underworld Breach, and you're playing Tendrils, and you're playing Brain Freeze. Quite a bit of overlap again with cluster 1. But this deck also quite a bit of improvement when all the cards got there. And lastly, for Seething Song, here's a visualization I made of basically the synergy of the card. It's actually a really exciting graph. It's win rate impact versus cluster frequency. It's on a log scale. So the x-axis is how frequently this card appears within each cluster. And I took all 8 clusters and averaged them all together. So it kind of takes like, if Sneak Attack appears a lot in certain decks in the cluster but not others, then it's going to appear in high frequency here because it's more of, within the clusters that matter, how much does Sneak Attack show up in that archetype. So we're kind of taking like 8 archetypes and overlaying them here, but I think this can still give us an idea of which cards are good and which cards are bad with Seething Song overall. Basically, the cards further to the right show up more often. The cards above the axis have a high impact on the win rate, and essentially they improve the win rate of the deck. And cards below axis have a negative win rate impact. And then the synergy score that I measured shows up in color. So like the most synergistic card, I believe, is Sneak Attack. Sneak Attack, Brain Freeze, LED, like Glorybringer. These are like the top synergy cards because they show up a lot in decks and they improve the win rate by a substantial amount. It seems like Glorybringer has the best improvement on win rate, but it doesn't show up in that many decks. And then negative cards like Tendril shows up a lot, Yawgmoth's Will. Minsc and Boo having a negative association with win rate is actually interesting, but that's what the data shows. Thornspire Verge, we hate it. Somehow really anti-synergistic. Mystical Tutor, Emrakul, anti-synergistic. It's interesting Goldspan Dragon is so negatively synergistic, whereas Glorybringer is so positively synergistic, because they're both quite similar, but Glorybringer is obviously way better. So Worldspine Worm, Flash, Lelia, Sparring Vantage. So yeah, you can see Basically, the archetypes we looked at before. What is this card? Pillage the Bog. It shows up in 10 decks, but decks running Pillage the Bog and Seething Song have an extremely high win rate boost. That's actually interesting. Win rate with Pillage the Bog is 0.56. That's higher than... That's the same as like with Glorybringer. That's nuts, actually. Rafine's Tower. Yeah, so these cards don't show up in decks that much. I think I filtered for anything below 10 decks, doesn't show up. So stuff on this part of the axis isn't that helpful. Soulring having anti-synergy with Seething Song is interesting, but only 25 decks. So basically, this stuff is really helpful, and it can tell you what cards to play. Wheel of Fortune, Negative Synergy, Frantic Search, Fury, Blood Crypt. Yeah, so we're going to do that for each card. And let me know if this, like, how many you want to see in a video and which cards you want to see too. All right, next up we have Tolarian Academy. Card I love to talk about because it's very interesting in general, but we finally get to see what cards have synergy and what don't. So, number one, Tinker, probably nobody surprised by that. I personally am surprised that Brain Freeze and Underworld Breach have some of the highest synergy with Tolarian Academy, but it kind of makes sense because Tolarian Academy is one of the best mana generation engines in the game. Then we see Mishra's Workshop makes sense, Portal to Phyrexia, and Nettle Cyst. Those two appear to be the best like artifact payoffs. Uganai the Storm's really good. Sowing Myco Spawn appears to be like the best way to tutor up a Tolarian Academy. Upheaval, Asika's Chariot is very surprising to me. But given that we have Restless, Vinestock, and Breeding Pool, it seems like Blue-Green Academy is potentially one of the better builds of Tolarian Academy, given what cards are synergistic with it. And then anti-synergistic, Yawgmoth's Will, Fast Spawn makes sense. Expedition Map is surprising, but I guess it makes sense because it's either you're spending like 3 mana to tutor up Tolarian Academy, and so it being an artifact doesn't really synergize with Academy because it's not in play if you use it to grab the Academy. Or it does synergize with Academy, but then it's just a 1-mana artifact sitting there. And that kind of is the same as Candelabra of Tawnos, card that I've been saying forever is not good with Academy, and the data we finally show this has 1, 2, 3, 4 top 5 anti-synergy with Tolarian Academy. Don't play Ulamog. Endstone kind of makes sense. I don't think if anyone's ever seen anyone play that successfully. Ramadan Crucible of Worlds. I guess people were doing Fast Spawn Crucible of Worlds Tolarian Academy, which is very interesting. Triplicate Titan having negative synergy is interesting. Probably the worst like Tinker target. We can look at Tinker probably and see if that's true. And then the rest are kind of what you would expect a little bit. So this is the performance of the deck. I already walked through what this graph is. But Tolarian Academy doesn't have too much variability in terms of its peak potential. The baseline wins are okay. Like there is like 2 or 3 archetypes that definitely underperform when they don't get there. But all the decks when they do get there have a similar like overall peak performance. When you have the best Academy deck possible, it kind of doesn't necessarily matter what archetype you're in so much. Compared to what we saw with Seething Song, where like cheating out a Glorybringer seems to be the best thing to be doing with Seething Song. So you can see all decks with Academy, not too many like peak wins. And there's a couple archetypes that have peak wins, but there's still a lot of decks that are in the 2 and 3 win category, even when you get all of the pieces coming together for Tolarian Academy. And so just looking at the clusters, cluster 0, which was the first 4 clusters have the highest like peak win rate. This appears to be like Urza, Upheaval, kind of like a standard blue Academy type deck. You get Candelabra Expedition Map, and the cards that make it the best are like getting Soul Ring, Carlocus, Mox, Black Lotus. That all makes sense. Cluster 7 seems to be like a very Tinker heavy Academy, so you're playing Tinker, Portal, Candelabra. So it just Tinker 98% in this deck doesn't even show up in Cluster 0. Kind of makes sense. So Cluster 7 Tinker does appear comparable to like an Urza more fair Academy deck. Currently it has slightly lower overall peak performance, but we do have 441 decks, so there's a fair amount of statistical significance there. Cluster 3 appears to be like Academy and Workshop. Nettle Cyst. That one has the highest peak performance, but it is kind of comparable to the other three. So it doesn't really seem to matter how you're building the deck. If you're putting Workshop, Mightstone and Weakstone, Nettle Cyst, if you're playing Tinker, if you're playing Urza, those three all seem to perform similarly. Cluster 4 looks like it is a blue-white controlling-ish Academy build. So you have like Fractured Any Balance, more that direction. The decks that make it better is leaning more into like a Johnny Splitskin Doll, more aggro, Staff of the Storyteller, and less balanced Fractured Identity type stuff. So that kind of makes sense. If you're playing Tolarian Academy in some type of blue-white aggro, you know it's over there. Cluster 6 appears to be blue-red with Third Path Iconoclast, Saheeli, Kappa Cannoneer for aggro. Mox Ruby and Time Walk Urza Saga make it the best because it's aggressive. So Tolarian Academy in aggro does seem to perform worse than Tolarian Academy in like more like Tinker style decks, but only slightly. It's 3.65, not too bad. Cluster 2 is Storm, which is kind of awesome. Yeah, Academy, Brain Freeze, LED, Breach, Candelabra, Lotus Petal, and the cards that make the most impact is like having a Mox, Ancestral, Time Walk, Stock Up, that kind of thing. So Tolarian Academy Storm, when you get all the pieces, performs worse than aggro Tolarian Academy and worse than all the like standard Tinker builds of Academy. But, you know, it still exists. Cluster 1 appears to be Blue-Green Academy. So like Oko, Mox Opal, Lotus Cobra, Ancestral Recall. Atrax is very surprising. I guess you're hard casting Atraxes there? I'm not really sure. Cluster 1. Wow, this one goes from like one of the worst performers to one of the highest performers when you get everything. And it seems like Lotus Cobra for some reason. Very high impact, but Soul Ring 2. And then the last one is Blue-Black, Tolarian Academy, like Psychic Frog Baleful Strix. That is both the worst performer baseline and has the lowest total potential. So I guess avoid Blue-Black Tolarian Academy is the, the takeaway here. And then looking at our interactive graph, we can see Underworld Breach, Brain Freeze, and Tinker are the three like peak synergy cards, followed by Mishra's Workshop, Retrofitter Foundry, Mox Opal Urza. So yeah, these are like all the cards you play with Tolarian Academy. So these are the ones that help Urza, Retrofitter, Mox Opal, Upheaval, that kind of thing. The cards that hurt are Lion's Eye Diamond, Candelabra, Expedition Map, Pinnacle Emissary, Third Path Iconoclast. Saheeli appears to be neutral. Doesn't really matter if you play her or not. Talisman is negative. Almost all the talismans are quite negative. Yeah, quite a few negative talismans. What's up here? Aether Spellbomb, Oko, Urza Saga helps a lot. Sowing Mycospawn, very high lift rate. Just doesn't show up with Academy that much, but definitely like an archetype to explore. Asika's Chariot is really surprising, but I guess if you're going like Sowing Mycospawn plus Oko, where's Oko? Yeah, Oko, Asika's Chariot kind of makes sense. Lotus Cobra, it shows up in 22 decks, has the highest win rate impact. This could be noise. There could be something here. I'm not really sure. But I think it just seems like Blue-Green Academy is going quite well. Blue-White Academy also quite good. Time Walk is good with Tolarian Academy. Surprise, surprise. But what's really interesting to me, if you look at all of these cards that have negative synergy, it is like all of the talismans, all of the things that give you mana with Academy are bad. Like Expedition Map, Candelabra, Talisman, 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 Penthead Prism, where is it? Coalition Relic, there's Coveted Jewel somewhere around here. Manamorphose, Sundering Titan, Memory Jar. All of the like cards that just give you mana don't seem to help Academy. It seems to be the cards that do other stuff. Aether Spellbomb, Currency Converter, Nettle Cyst, Retrofitter Foundry. Those are the cards you want to be playing with Tolarian Academy, not give me more mana, you know, like play a Talisman. The other thing is Talisman's so slow that you get the awkward hand of not being able to play. If you have like Academy land Talisman, you can't really do anything. You need a third land to be able to play the Talisman to then enable your Academy. So you really want ones and zeros with Tolarian Academy. But it seems like blue-white, blue-green is doing quite well with Academy. Red less so. Ulamog, Persist. Yeah, don't play Persist Hymn to Torark with Tolarian Academy. This just in. And Tinker's going to be fairly similar, so I'm going to go over this a little bit faster because we just saw a lot, but Tinker, Tolarian Academy. Best synergy. It seems like the best Tinker targets are Bolus's Citadel, Portal to Phyrexia, and Kappa Cannoneer. Nothing else. Golos, I guess, has some synergy. What things have negative synergy? Are there any? Batter Skull, I guess you don't want to be tinkering for Batter Skull. Tinker for Caldra Complete, also negative synergy is interesting. Um, Portal of Phyrexia. Tesbert Cruel Captain, quite good in a Tinker deck, distinctly. And again, it appears like Bant colors tend to do quite well, like Explore, Teferi, Celestial Colonnade, all being pretty helpful here. Although Third Path Iconoclast also blue-red. So basically, don't play black in your Tinker decks. Tendrils being the most anti-synergistic. Candelabra number 2, Expedition Map number 3. So like, really, I think the big takeaway is don't play Candelabra Expedition Map in your artifact decks, and you'll just be better. And the talismans also really seem to be underperforming quite substantially. Also, don't play Tinker Underworld Breach, I guess. Like, mixing... It seems like if you're playing Academy, you want to play Academy Breach, or you want to be playing Tinker Artifacts. Not doing both. Tinker has a higher ceiling than Tolarian Academy does. These two clusters in particular are pretty high, and you can see there's a lot of variance in terms of like how well the peak archetypes are performing with Tinker. Like the baseline deck, they're all really similar, but there's so much variation in terms of how good a deck can get when you get there, which is kind of cool. So we can look through those. Cluster 3, Tinker, Tolarian Academy, that makes sense. Mightstone and Weakstone, yeah. Tinker, Tolarian Academy, very high impact. This one is Tinker without Tolarian Academy. More Urza, slower controlling, but still pretty high. Cluster 5 has basically this. Cluster 4 is basically the same performance as Cluster 5. This appears to be blue-white, so you have like Balance to Fairy, Tinker, but no Tolarian Academy. So that kind of makes sense. I wonder if Tolarian Academy is the deciding factor for these two. Yes, this one, Tolarian Academy, makes this deck significantly better. This is blue-red Tinker, cluster 6. So very high performance for that one when the deck gets there, which means you have like a Mox, you have Tolarian Academy, you know, you have that kind of thing. And then cluster 0 is also high performer, Dak Faden. So this appears to be like a blue-red controlling style Tinker with Force of Will, Daze, Tundra, Remand, Preordain. That's kind of cool. Actually, these are two extremely different archetypes. One is like a fast Tinker with Tolarian Academy. That's performing really well. But even better than that is Control Tinker. Specifically, if you're hitting Portal to Phyrexia, seems to be the best target. That's really cool. That's not an archetype that I've played that much. But it's cool to see that be there. And then this appears to be blue-green Tinker. So still Tinker, Portal of Phyrexia, you have Oko, Talisman, Crop Rotation, that kind of thing. But Cluster 7, not nearly as high performance. So something about Force of Will, Daze, Remand, really helping this deck along. Which kind of makes sense. Cluster 1, which is the lowest overall performer, which makes sense because it's blue-black Tinker. You got Baleful Strix, Psychic Frog, Bolus's Citadel. So Tinker for Citadel is good, but I guess if you're playing black, it's not as good. And then this is Tinker Storm, like Tinker, Citadel, Brain Freeze, LED Tendrils, Urza Saga, Candelabra, Sol Ring, Jace, Tolarian Academy, Misty, those kind of things. So Tinker Storm, lowest baseline performance, and even if you get there, it's okay, but not the best deck by any means. So, looking at Tinker's graph, Tolarian Academy being the best, it makes sense. This is, I think, the highest synergy score like thing we've seen. Maybe not raw synergy score, but it's played a lot and it boosts your win rate a lot to be playing Academy with Tinker. Brain Freeze is the next closest. Candelabra has negative synergy, but a slightly high win rate impact, which the way that works, so we group this by clusters and we average by clusters. So what that means is there's a lot of clusters where Candelabra has like extremely negative synergy, But then this means that there's one cluster that Candelabra boosts the win rate a lot. My guess would be the Tinker Storm build. So overall, the synergy score between Candelabra and Tinker is low. But because of the way we're normalizing, there's at least one deck where it does help you win playing Candelabra with Tinker. And maybe if you want to see, I can dive more into the data to see what that specific build is where Candelabra is helping you. But overall, the synergy score is quite negative when you look at every cluster. But within at least one cluster, it's helpful. All the rest, though, it seems like it's not helpful. Workshop, Citadel, Retrofitter, Tendrils of Agony has negative. Bone Crusher, Giant, Explorer, Beaumont Courier. Guy's Cradle and Tinker deck. That's definitely something. Here's all of your like control interactive cards: Mana Drain, Remand, Duress, Force of Will, Mox Diamond. So those are played less, but they help more. Urza's Saga really good. Coveted Jewel with Tinker makes sense. Talismans do tend better with Tinker, which also makes sense because you can Talisman turn 2 and then Tinker turn 3. Although some of the Talismans don't help. Ketria Triumph, Fractured Identity, not having positive synergy. Okay, yeah, that's cool. So that's Tinker's data. We're here with Flash now. This one's really interesting. Straight off the bat, Natural Order, highest synergy with Flash. Who would have guessed? Not me. And then alongside that, World Spine Worm and Atraxa seem to be the two best Flash targets. Not particularly surprising there. But I honestly, I don't think I've even seen Natural Order, Flash, World Spine Worm, Atraxa, but that appears to be the best deck. Sneak Attack, also quite a bit of synergy, but it seems like if you want to be flashing, play blue-green. Blue-green-red. Territorial Kavu having really high synergy is surprising. Retrofitter Foundry, Mightstone and Weakstone, Animate Dead. So it makes sense. Basically, you have Natural Order Flash, you have Sneak Attack Flash, you have Reanimate Flash, and then you kind of have like blue-green stuff. Survival of the Fittest, the worst. Tendrils has negative synergy with almost everything. Seems like people just put Tendrils in like any deck and just go for it. It seems like Flash, Mosswood Dread Knight, or Knight of the Reliquary Regrowth. Like, I don't think Flash decks want to have too much staying power. They want to kill you pretty quickly. That kind of makes sense to me. So Flash decks, again, a lower baseline. There's kind of two builds of the deck that have sort of the highest potential. One build that has the lowest potential by far. You can see that's cluster number 5. So even when you get all of the cards, you're not getting that many 7 and 6 win decks compared to like cluster 3, you're getting quite a few 6 and 7 win decks. And that was cluster 1 is the highest performer. Flash, Sneak Attack, Necromancy, Torsten, Woodfall Primus, Atraxa. So yeah, this is blue-green Flash, and I assume there's some type of Natural Order maybe in there. Nethergoyf, Black Lotus, Flooded Strand, Consider. Okay, yeah, this is just the Flash deck that has everything. Flash, Sneak, Necromancy, all of the big fatties to reanimate. I guess when the deck gets there, that's the best one. Just put all of the combo pieces in one. Notably, it's not trying to do Emrakul stuff. Cluster 5 is the one that has the lowest overall improvement, and that kind of makes sense because you're trying to do Emrakul things. But Emrakul doesn't really work with Flash, so it's kind of weird. Natural Order doesn't really work with Emrakul, so that kind of makes sense. That build is weird. 336 people did it, though. Cluster 2 appears to be straight up like blue-black Flash Reanimate, so decent performance there. Flash, World Spine Worm, Sneak Attack, Remand. To be honest, it's hard to tell the difference between Cluster 0 and Cluster 1. Flash, World Spine Worm, Woodfall Primus. Oh, this is Flash, Sneak Attack, Necromancy. This is Flash, World Spine Worm, Woodfall Primus, Torsten, Sneak Attack. And this one seems to be a bit more aggressive with Lelia. So this is like playing Flash in kind of a different archetype, I guess. This looks like to be red-green Flash, Cluster 6. So these are all kind of the same deck, very similar baseline performances. Yeah, this appears to be like Sultai Flash. This one, Cluster 0. Oh, I went backwards. That makes sense. Okay, yeah, so let's look at the data, but the decks with Flash seem to be pretty similar. There's uh like Reanimator Flash, there's all in Flash Sneak Reanimator, and then there's kind of like a natural order-ish build. And it seems like the all-in build surprisingly is the best way to do Flash, at least if the deck gets there. So quickly going through this, Worldspine Worm, kind of the best synergy, natural order, Mishra's Workshop. What's weird to me, because you can flash a Triplicate Titan, you can flash a Mer Battle Sphere. That makes sense actually. That's kind of cool. So Mishra's Workshop has synergy. Tolarian Academy has negative synergy. Torsten appears to be neutral as far as flash targets go, but Woodfall Primus, Atraxa, Archon of Cruelty, and Worldspine Worm appear to be the things you want to flash in. Uh, Enduring Curiosity. 22 decks played it, and it helped you win a lot. So it's probably just noise. Ancestral Recall, very helpful in a flash deck. That kind of makes sense. Oh, Sunfall. One of the few decks I've seen that actually has positive win rate impact. So maybe like a flash control build. Yeah, Mystic Confluence, Mana Drain. Okay, there is a flash control build here. Force of Will, Memory Lapse, Miscalc, all being positive win rate. What don't you want to play? Gristleblade Flash makes sense. Crabomination, you don't flash. It's interesting that Triplicate Titan has negative flash synergy when Mishra's Workshop has positive. Also persists negative synergy. Thornspire Verge, Fast Bond. Yeah, don't don't be doing that. There's probably Tendril somewhere over here. Negative synergy. Don't flash out a Golos. Knight of the Reliquary is like the worst card to be playing with flash, apparently. Then we get to Sneak Attack, everyone's favorite card. It is interesting seeing like the subtle differences between the different archetypes. Like Sneak Attack, the best card to be sneaking out is Archon of Cruelty, followed by Emrakul, followed by Atraxa. At least the fatty, I guess. Emperor of Bones is better than Atraxa with Sneak Attack. Probably just because it's good in the archetype, not necessarily that it's the best thing to put into play off a sneak. And then Gristlebrand is significantly less impactful than Archon, Emrakul, Atraxa. Also, synergy with Natural Order, so kind of getting a sense of what the good performing archetypes are now, right? Because you're seeing Natural Order Sneak Attack has synergy, Natural Order Flash has synergy. So it seems like the best builds of Flash, Sneak Attack involve Natural Order to some degree, which would make sense why you want Atraxa, you want Woodfall Primus, even though I'm not seeing that in the positive synergy. We'll probably find it in the overall graph. And the negative synergy, I guess you don't want to be sneak attacking a Torsten or a Grave Titan, and you don't want to be playing Craterhoof Behemoth. That's interesting. So you want to be playing Natural Order, but no Craterhoof Behemoth or Channel. I guess that kind of makes sense, because Craterhoof, if you're playing a lot of creatures, Craterhoof is good. So you want to be playing Natural Order, but not with enough creatures to be able to like kill them with Craterhoof damage, and then Sneak Attack is good. That's kind of what I'm intuiting from this. Actually, wow. Sneak Attack does have 2 decks with fairly above average performance when all the cards come together. So I'm actually really curious what those are. Clusters 2 and 4. Everything else is quite poor overall win rate. And when you don't get there, it's pretty bad. So, but there is a good Sneak Attack deck somewhere. And that is Sneak Attack, Animate Dead. It appears to be black, red, Sneak Reanimator, Library. Nope, there's blue. It seems Grixis Sneak. I'm guessing Flash gets involved in this sometimes. Fairly high performance there. And then this is Sneak Flash, Woodfall Primus, Steam Vents. Gets better with Demonic Tutor, Ancestral, and Mana Drain. Who knew? So, yeah, Cluster 4. This is about the best you can ask for with a Sneak deck. Makes sense. You're also getting Flash, Worldspine Worm, oftentimes Ancestral, Demonic Tutor, Mana Drain, so you can be about a 4.15 win rate. I'm guessing the other ones are going to be fairly similar. Yeah, this is Sneak Atraxa with like red-green. This is Archon of Cruelty Sneak. Yeah. Yeah, I feel like these don't have as many separate archetypes as some of the other decks. So a lot of these smaller clusters bend together. But there's only one build of Sneak that included Flash as a main component, and that's the best performing one. So if you want to be doing one, you want to be doing both. Although I did see we have Sneak Natural Order is cluster 3. So it's actually underperforming Sneak Flash, which is interesting. And then we have Sneak Triplicate Titan Emrakul Atali. This appears to be kind of all in Sneak on 1. Not that great of performance. And then I saw Sneak Channel. Yeah, Sneak Channel, Emrakul, Wordspine Worm, Show and Tell. So this is kind of all in unfair stuff. Elder Gargoth as a failsafe is kind of good. Doesn't perform that well, as you kind of expect with how Channel is doing. And then this appears to be playing Sneak in like a mono red deck, which does not perform very well either. So don't do that. Despite how good Seething Song is in mono red, Sneak Attack doesn't appear to be that good. Wow, Sneak Attack has not that many cards with high synergy. The peak synergy score is 2, which appears to be Flash, which makes sense. Flash, Archon, Atraxa, you know, the things we kind of expected. Play Gristlebrand, play Atraxa, play Emperor of Bones. Bloodtithe Harvester being high synergy is interesting. Negative synergy, Channel. Worldspine Worm negative synergy with Sneak Attack is interesting. I wonder why that is. Because it has positive synergy with Flash. Same with Woodfall Primus being negative. You want to be sneaking Archons, Emrakuls, and Atraxas. Not necessarily Torstens, Worldspine Worms, or Woodfall Primus. That's very surprising. I want to see what these are. Oust. Okay. Canker Bloom, Goblin Bombardment. Goblin Bombardment Sneak Attack is definitely cooking. Seasoned Pyro Sneak has quite a bit of positive. That kind of makes sense. Pay 1. Tidebinder, Barrowgoyf, Demonic Tutor, High Synergy, Malcolm, Fury. Okay, don't Sneak Attack Ulamog or Craterhoof. That's like really, really high negative synergy with those. Recurring Nightmare, not very good. I'm really surprised that Worldspine Worm and Woodfall Primus have negative synergy when Flash has positive synergy. But I guess if you're just sneaking them in, it kind of makes sense because Sneak Worldspine Worm is too slow. I don't know. Let me know in the comments if you have any thoughts on why that might be. And lastly, I'm not going fully in depth on Guide of Souls yet. I just wanted to give you like a point of comparison because the discussion around Cube is always Boros, right? Boros is the best deck in the format, and so this isn't even Boros. This is just a white card, but this is what Guide of Souls looks like in its data. And there are quite a few different archetypes to play it in, but man, like the baseline performance of Guide of Souls is so high. It is worth mentioning. There's not as much like synergy boost with Guide of Souls, which kind of makes sense. Like you just want to play this with creatures. There's not too much complicated stuff to get there. So I think a lot of the discussion around the Boros deck or white aggro has been they're easy to put together. And I guess what this metrics are showing is, yeah, the deck's easy to put together, but they're so good. Look at this clustering. So this is kind of the win distribution of every deck with Guide of Souls. Quite a few 7-win decks, but when you look at high synergy decks, look at this distribution. It's like, oh my gosh. Every cluster is all 7 wins. Some of them have almost no 0 wins or 1 wins. Like they're just all crushing it. Cluster 3 has a average win of 5, which is just nuts. And so I just wanted to compare these two against each other. This is the baseline performance of Guide of Souls, which just means like any player with a random Guide of Souls deck. And this is a Tolarian Academy deck when you get all of the pieces that your deck is looking for. And if this histogram doesn't make it that clear, we'll look at this one first. Like the best performing Tolarian Academy deck when you get all of your pieces is like mean win rate of 3.99, which is worse than just an average Guide of Souls deck, at least these top 3 clusters. So not worse than every Guide of Souls deck, but we're looking at the best performing Tolarian Academy deck. It's worse than, you know, the top 3 Guide of Souls archetypes, which I assume this one is Boros. And then the best performing Guide of Souls deck, when you get everything, has an average win rate of 4.96, which is so high. And that's what this graph is showing. This is comparing the win rate distribution of a Guide of Souls deck that gets there to a Tolarian Academy deck that gets there. And it, like, look at this distribution in number 7 wins. It's insane. It doesn't do anything else but win, basically. So yeah, I'll go more in depth into like the more aggro cards, but I just wanted to, I guess, reiterate what I've been saying, because I get so many comments saying like Tolarian Academy has more raw power than the Boros deck, and like a good Tolarian Academy will smoke any aggro deck, and just there's nothing in the data that suggests that at all. A good Tolarian Academy deck, which we have with this data statistically measured, is worse than an average Boros deck. And that's what the data is showing us. And I know there's going to be people commenting like, yes, but a good Tolarian Academy deck in the hands of a top player. We're already filtering for the best archetype, right? So we have different clusters. This is all the different archetypes of Tolarian Academy. And then within that archetype, within the best performing archetype, I'm filtering for the top 25% of decks in that archetype. So right, this is 1/8 and then 1/4. So this is 132. This is like the top 3% of Tolarian Academy decks right here. And it's not even beating an average Boros deck. There's not much more like splitting of hairs you can get than that. Anyway, if you like this and you want to see more cards, comment down below what cards you want to see. And I'll try and make more analysis, because like, I don't know how long this video took. We only got through like 5 cards. There's so much more to talk about. So if you want to see it, let me know, and I'll be making more videos. See you then. Hey, and if you like the way I talk about card games, play card games, or if you like just how much depth I'm willing to go into analyzing card games, you might be interested in a card game that I designed. So Algomancy is a card game that I spent 3 years of my life designing, and I put a lot of effort specifically into making sure to solve some of the key problems that many card games run into. So the one I'm most excited about is you can play Algomancy getting a cube draft style experience with any number of players. So you can do a 1v1 game where you're drafting against your opponent and it works out. Whereas if you're trying to cube draft or like draft something like Magic the Gathering, you usually need 6 to 8. So 1v1 cube draft experience is really awesome. The second thing is Algomancy has no first player advantage. So you never have to worry about, oh, I lost the die roll, you know, that made me lose the game or whatever. There's a lot of other really awesome things about the game. If you're interested, go check it out, link in the description. And there's a new expansion coming out, the Algomancy Light and Dark expansion, coming sometime spring 2026. So if you want to support that or support the channel, go follow it on Kickstarter. We're adding 2 new elements to the game, which brings a ton of depth. And I'm very excited about how much depth there is in this expansion. There's a lot of cool things you can do here. I like the way it looks too. So if you're interested in that at all, go check it out. Otherwise, just keep enjoying the videos.